He is the cruelest killer that I know. He picks up the needle and directly pierces the police's neck. The strong anesthetic caused the man to fall on the ground immediately. Looking at the filled with the horror of face, Fritz feels so excited. He turns around and takes out a nail hammer. He violently uses the hammer to strike the police's head. The poor policeman is killed on the scene. The man who killed the police is an abnormal killer. His name is Fritz. But no matter how fierce he is, in the end, he is still subdued by this masculine woman. Her name is Carrie. She is a woman that even the murderers are also afraid of. She likes to get rid of evils. She especially hunts serial killers. For more than 20 years, there has never been any bad guy who can escape from her. Today, I want to tell you about Carrie's story. This man sharpening his knife is a serial killer. His name is Phil. Before action, he would sharpen his weapons. Then he puts them neatly into the bag. As soon as he goes out, he fixes his eye on the girl in the phone booth. At this time, he doesn't notice that his left eyelid keeps twitching. Then Phil tries to strike up a conversation with that girl as usual. Unexpectedly, this time it is so smooth. Looking at the prey, Phil is so excited. Then, when the woman doesn't pay attention, he locks the car door. But Phil hasn't done anything. Carrie takes out the knife and stabs his throat. The woman doesn't allow Phil a breathing spell. She stabs Phil repeatedly. Carrie stabbed him more than 30 times in a row. Then she chops him into the minced meat. Then the scene changes to the bar. The young Joel accidentally comes in a room. But he doesn't know that these people are abnormal killers all over the world. They are electing the leader of this session. They mistake Joel for Phil. Sensing danger if they realize he isn't supposed to be there, Joe plays along. He says that he's Phil. The doorbell suddenly rings. He's Bob, Phil's best friend. He directly exposes Joel's lie. Joel quickly runs away, but Bob seizes and hurls him into the ground. The poor Joel is instantly surrounded by a group of killers. When the killers argue over how to handle Joel, Zachary and Mike have a dispute. That makes Mike feel angry. He picks up the chopsticks and stabs Zachary's throat. Hideo also helps Mike to stab Zachary. He cuts open Zachary's belly. Joel is shocked at the bloody scene in front of him. At this time, Joel's tape recorder falls off. Everyone immediately realizes that he may be a mole. Carrie uses the opportunity to kick Joel into the kitchen. Then she locks herself and Joel inside there. Everyone still stands outside. They think that Carrie is going to kill Joel alone. Carrie takes out the hammer and comes to Joel. But she doesn't kill Joel. She just props against the door. This action makes Joel confused. Carrie's is not a killer. She just sneaks into the group of killers because she has to assassinate all of the serial killers. At this time, Carrie doesn't want to explain to Joel too much. She throws the knife over and shuts him up. The 4 people outside the kitchen are all serial killers. This Japanese man is a chef. His special skill is to use human skin to make a variety of high-end dishes. This tall man is called Mike. Everyone called him a butcher weld. He likes to cut people off the waist. No one can live under his knife. This man in a suit and leather shoes is the cruelest killer in the city, Fritz. Before killing someone, he always makes up weirdly. But among this group of the killer, the most dangerous person is Bob. Because his IQ surpasses Edison, he often kills others by disguising himself as someone else. No one has ever caught him. At this time, Carrie opens the refrigerator. It turns out that the dead body in the refrigerator is Phil's. He is cut open by Carrie. The intestines are all taken out. Carrie wants to use Phi's body to replace Joel. Make other killers think that Joel has died tragically. Because Carrie hasn't opened the door for a long time, other killers also notice that there's something wrong. Hideo is looking at the overhead vent. He decides to sneak into the kitchen through an overhead vent. Fritz secretly comes to the back door and opens the lock. At this time, Carrie also hears the sound. She picks up the chopper and hides in the darkness. Now she and Fritz are separated by a wall. In a wink, they raise their knives at the same time. But Carrie is still faster than Fritz. She cuts off Fritz's fingers. On the other hand, Hideo is crawling in the vent. Then he removes the windshield and jumps from the roof. Hideo also finds a fake Joel lying on the ground. When he is going to check it out, Joel in the corner makes a noise accidentally. Hideo immediately throws the knife at Joel. Joel is lucky to avoid his knife. But the man turns around and takes out a sharper knife. At this time, Carrie comes in. She strangles him to death. Within a minute, the man is killed by Carrie. Now there are only 3 people left in the group of killers. They find that it would be better to use strategy than to attack by force. Bob immediately disguises himself as the victim and calls the police. He talks to the police. Carrie and Joel are the killers. In the kitchen, Carrie takes out the list of killers and crosses out Hideo's name. When they are going to leave, the police also rush over. In this way, Joel and Carrie are arrested by the police. All of this is in Bob's plan. In the police station, Joel tries to explain what happened just now. But the policeman doesn't believe him at all. Another policeman even whistles at her. Then he is scared terribly by a fake action. The police find there's something wrong. He decides to ask the inspector to come and deal with the 2 crimes. In this way, both Carrie and Joel are locked in prison. On the other hand, Bob's plan is also quietly proceeding. He disguises himself as a detective and comes to inspect 2 suspects. Then he comes to the ward. At this moment, Joel immediately recognizes Bob. But no matter how he testifies the killer, no one believes it. Bob tries to provoke him. That makes Joel feel angry. Then, Joel is beaten by the police. Before leaving, Bob gives Carrie a triumphant look. They have been being Bob's scapegoat. In another room, the police are drinking. At this time, the lights suddenly turn off. The policeman is a little worried, he hurried to check. After coming into the room, the policeman finds there are some blood marks on the ground. But there isn't a dead body around. At this time, he is stabbed by a knife. The policeman's arm is cut off instantly. He hasn't reacted yet. Mike pierces the policeman's body with a single knife. The poor policeman is instantly killed. Bob is also going into action now. He takes out 2 chopsticks. Then he sticks in the policeman's ears. The policeman dies instantly. Bob also takes his clothes and tears off the beard. It seems to be Bloody Rains is coming. But he hasn't left the room yet. Bob is scared out of his wits by Fritz. When he just recovers from the shock, he is scared stiff once more time by Mike. Then the 3 of them come to the ward to see Carrie. Unexpectedly, the 2 of them had already escaped. Bob finds out Carrie's kill list. Carrie's kill list reveals what she has been doing. Carrie, who has just escaped, immediately pushed Joel out of the station. Then she locks herself in the station and is ready to struggle with other killers. When Mike walks into the room, he finds that all the light is turned off. At this time, a dummy in the corner also frightens him. Carrie is right next to the dummy. She immediately attacks Mike. She takes out a knife, cuts directly on Mike's neck. But he seems to be unharmed. He pulls out the knife from his neck and attacks Carrie repeatedly. But this woman is very flexible. She perfectly avoids every attack from Mike. Then she continuously punches him. She drags him to the ground. Carrie doesn't give him a chance to fight back. She stabs him with a knife. At this time, the girlfriend of Joel comes to the police station. But no matter how she knocks on the door, no one responds to her. But the rapid knock on the door makes Fritz attention. Seeing the prey coming to the door, Fritz feels so excited. Then he silently opens the door. The girl immediately goes to the station. When she asks herself why there's no one in the police station, the lights suddenly turn on. Fritz also appears in front of her. Looking at the weird man, Sarah doesn't scare at all. Instead, she punches Fritz repeatedly. At this time, Joel also comes back to the police station. They feel so confused. Carrie quickly comes in, she uses Fritz's injection to kill him. Fritz instantly falls to the ground. Carrie doesn't intend to let this evil live. She easily tosses down the cabinet to crush Fritz. But before she left, she is attacked by Bob. A dagger directly sticks into Carrie's back. When the man wants to stab Carrie once more time, Joel steps in to shield Carrie and gets stabbed in his arm. But Bob doesn't want to stop, he is more fierce. He wants to choke Carrie to death. At that moment, Joel picks up the phone on the side and strikes Bob. Bob immediately goes into a coma. Afterward, Joel hurried to drag Carrie to find his girlfriend. When they are preparing to leave here, the terrifying Henry appears in front of the car. At this time, Sarah can't think anything. She runs into Bob. Bob doesn't have time to dodge, he is knocked to the ground. Then, they rush to the hospital for treatment. The dagger in his hand is also pulled out by the doctor. But Carrie in the ward is still in a coma. Joel comes to the locker room. He finds blood marks on the ground. He opens the door and takes a look. It turns out that Bob secretly changes his clothes. At this time, he has disguised himself as a doctor. Then he comes to Carrie quietly. Looking at this cruel woman, he immediately picks up the scalpel. But before he starts, Carrie restores the consciousness. Bob is also hurled by Joel. After that, Joel uses the hospital bed to push Bob out. Bob bumps against the wall. The 2 men start fighting together. When Bob picks up the knife and wants to stab Joel, Carrie rushes over in time. She turns around and stabs Bob with a knife. Carrie knows that when dealing with such a devil, can never be soft-hearted. Must stab to death. In this way, Boss is stabbed by her repeatedly. The group of killers is completely wiped out. But the story is not over. That day, Joel comes to a convenience store. He finds that the salesman is a bit strange. He comes to the kitchen for a look. It turns out that this man kidnapped a young girl. Finding that his crime is exposed, the man turns around and prepares to flee. But he hasn't left the store yet, he is killed by Carrie. They also form a new killer alliance. They specialize in killing the evildoer. It's the end. It's a good movie. It's the battle between fierce Carrie and the serial killers. The fight scene in the movie is very wonderful. The atmosphere of the entire movie is also very good. The movie is full of 1980s style. The setting of each killer is also like paying tribute to classic horror movies. It's a wonderful movie. Like, follow, and share if you like this movie. Thank you.